In this video, I'll be going into what amino acids are and why they are so important in helping our body function properly. Amino acids are the building blocks that help make up a protein. Proteins come in a wide variety of shapes, and they generally are between 50 and 2,000 amino acids long. These long chains of amino acids that are also known as polypeptide chains are what make up proteins. And if you're looking at one structure of an amino acid and the general structure for amino acids, you can look at this little diagram I drew right here where you have the functional groups of a carboxylic acid, an amine group, and an R side chain, and that make up an amino acid. And that R side chain is what differentiates each amino acid from one another. So there are 20 different amino acids. 9 are essential, meaning there are 9 that you must get from your diet. There's no other way to get these 9 essential amino acids except from your diet. Your body cannot synthesize these amino acids to make proteins in your body. We also have our non-essential amino acids, which are just amino acids that our body can actually make on its own, so we don't need to consume them through diet. And there are 5 different non-essential amino acids. And then we also have conditionally essential amino acids, and there are 6 of them. What this essentially means is our body can normally synthesize the 6 conditionally essential amino acids, except in cases of high stress or illness, and our body can't synthesize them in those cases. So if you're healthy, don't worry about those. A big reason why you could be coming to watch this video and trying to understand what amino acids are and how they function in our body is because you're trying to find foods that are complete proteins. Now, a complete protein is a food that contains all 9 of the essential amino acids. Those are the amino acids that we can only get through our diet. Foods that are well known to be complete proteins are animal products like dairy, fish, meat, and eggs. While animal products are great sources of complete proteins, we can also find complete proteins in the forms of non-animal sources, such as soy, quinoa, and chia seeds. There are others, of course, but I can't really name them off the top of my head. Contrary to popular belief, and I'm not vegan or vegetarian or anything like that, I'm not trying to promote it or anything, but vegans and vegetarians can actually get their essential amino acids through their vegetable proteins. However, plant-based proteins have been found to be much more difficult for our human bodies to absorb than animal-based proteins. It's because of the difficulty in digesting these plant-based proteins that our body absorbs less of the plant-based proteins relative to the animal-based proteins. While I started off by saying that there are plant-based proteins that can get you your 9 essential amino acids, for the most part, plant-based proteins are not complete proteins. And for that reason, you have to look to mix different plant-based proteins that compensate for what other plant-based proteins lack. An example that I state right here is that of lentils. And lentils are a great source of plant-based protein. However, they're lacking in the amino acids cysteine and methionine. And to compensate for that lack of amino acids, the cysteine and methionine, we can mix it with something that has those amino acids, such as a grain like rice. In mixing the lentils and the rice, you're getting your non-essential amino acids in a meal. Proteolysis refers to the process of breaking down protein in our body into amino acids. Proteo means from protein, and in biology, lysis means the breakdown of. You can find the word lysis in other words like hydrolysis or glycolysis. All of that is just so you remember what proteolysis actually is. With that being said, let's get into how proteolysis works in our body. The first step of proteolysis is for an individual to consume a protein source. And in this case, we have our little guy who's eating the protein source, and it's going next into his stomach where that protein will encounter hydrochloric acid or HCl, where the protein is denatured so that the digestive enzymes have an easier time in doing their job, which is in this case done by an enzyme called pepsin that comes in to cut the denatured protein into smaller oligopeptide chains. An oligopeptide chain is a peptide chain whose molecules contain a relatively small number of amino acids. So now this protein that was denatured and then cut into oligopeptide chains will now be sent into the duodenum in the form of oligopeptide chains, where it will encounter more enzymes that will cut these oligopeptide chains into tripeptides, into dipeptides, and individual amino acids, where they will then move to intestinal cells where tripeptides and dipeptides are converted into individual amino acids. Some of the amino acids will stay in the intestinal cells to synthesize intestinal enzymes are proteins, and to create proteins that help make new cells. However, most of the amino acids will actually enter the bloodstream and go to different parts of the body where these amino acids will synthesize different types of proteins. That is right, we have different types of proteins. Protein is not just used for muscle repair and tissue growth. One type of protein whose impact cannot be understated is an enzyme. Enzymes build and break down molecules, as you've seen in proteolysis. They help break down those peptide chains. They're critical for growth and digestion and many processes in the cell. Without enzymes, chemical reactions would happen too slowly for us to sustain life. So, suffice to say, they're very important. We also have contractile or motor proteins that you're probably more familiar with. An example of one of them are myosins, that are a superfamily of actin motor proteins that convert chemical energy in the form of ATP to mechanical energy, thus generating force and movement. The first identified myosin, myosin 2, is responsible for generating muscle contractions. We also have signaling proteins that allow for cells to communicate with each other with the help of receptors. An example of a signal protein would be a hormonal receptor. We also have defense proteins that allow our body to fight infection, heal damaged tissue. An example would be an antibody that battles the bacteria and viruses that make us sick. Structural proteins have the role of strengthening cells, tissues, organs, and more. An example of a structural protein would be collagen, which you probably heard of, which strengthens our bones, cartilage, tendons, ligaments, and skin. An example of a storage protein is ovalbumin, which is the main storage protein in egg whites. It provides an energy source to the growing bird embryo. Finally, we have our transport proteins. Transport proteins move molecules and nutrients around the body and in and out of cells. An example of a transport protein are hemoglobin that we can find in red blood cells that pick up oxygen from the lungs and deliver it to all the tissues in the body. Amino acids allow for all these different types of proteins to be created and for them to be functioning in our body. The behaviors and foods we eat every single day heavily impact our perception of the world. Make sure you're getting your essential amino acids.